the plains of Madison County, Ohio, there is a place that represents a community, a place that fosters a culture, a place that was built by previous generations to build this generation, to build the next generation.
Galen raised the pitch.
This place is marked by a complex of buildings, all added, one to another, as consecutive generations continue to build. This complex, however, does not fully represent this place. It's the people, the generations, that make this place. This is that place. We are that place. Congratulations on 75 years, Plainview.
I enjoyed school at Plainview. Now, the parents that built that school made a large sacrifice. And it all happened because of Jonas Gingrich Jr., known as Little Jonas, and Walter Allison, of all things. Walter Allison was the principal at Canaan. Jonas Gingrich was a great promoter of Christian education, and I'm not convinced that he would have been able to swing it in this community had it not been for Walter Allison, who was the principal at Canaan. That was a local public school. And his harsh discipline methods caused quite a reaction in the community. In 1947, things were looking up in this country. The war was over. It ended in 1945, the Second World War. The school started showing educational movies. And the first time they showed one, I was present in the auditorium. And it was a scientific thing of nature, and I'm not sure what all else. The Amish people especially, and even I think the people from United Bethel, did not want their children to be exposed to that. I remember when a film was shown and the high school students were supposed to come to the auditorium to see it, and the Amish boys refused. They hung to their desks when Walter Allison tried to pull them out, and he went and got some other high school boys to help him, and I remember seeing them drag these students into the auditorium. And so that helped a lot in the community's response, and people were ready to build their own school.
They had a committee or a board elected to carry on the vision and get started with pursuing the building of the school and getting approval and all that. They had decided to go to Columbus and meet with some officials and how to get this school started. They met in Plain City at a parking lot before going down to Columbus. There was one board member that had some qualms about proceeding. And he said he did some calculating and figuring, and he said the finances look impossible. He said, there's no way we can build this school. The cost is too high, people won't contribute, and there's some opposition about building a school, and he just thinks it's a futile attempt to go on with it. I don't know that anybody went home, but they were about ready to, and Jonas said, let's go. Jonas Gingrich. He was the man that had the vision, and he said, let's go to Columbus. So they did go. They had a good reception. They decided to go on and pursue the building of the school for the sake of their children and the community children.
And of course, they needed a site, and Joe Miller, One-Armed Joe, Amish preacher, donated the land where the school now sits, and I think he charged $1 for it. They had to charge something. So that summer, in their spare time, the people were over there building, and they just kept working until they had it ready. So they didn't have the ability to start in September like most schools do. And so on December 8th of 1947, the school opened. The school constituency was about 2/3 Amish and about 1/3 conservative Mennonites belonging to the United Bethel congregation. And of course, there were also some from the Canaan church, the Beachy church.
Okay, the first day of school. As being a second grader, I remember very little about what was said, but the impression that was left on me is how emotional the board was to now. And I didn't realize this whole thing, but to see this whole student body and all the work they had put into this, the dream had been fulfilled, the vision had been fulfilled, and now it's reality. And I could see, being my age, I could see why it was emotional. And so they got up one by one and gave a talk. And I remember thinking, I wonder if the next one is going to break down and weep like the first one did. And sure enough, I knew they were trying to brace up, and it was so emotional they just all broke down and cried.
The Amish people tended to fear the influence of the world, as it was called, and tried to avoid anything that would lead in that direction. And so they started to become alarmed at the way that things were going at school. We memorized scripture, and we had programs on a Friday afternoon, and students participated in those. And when they got out of school, they missed that, a kind of spiritual emphasis. And so the first year that the school ended, and the people who were in 10th grade and were not coming back wanted to pursue some of those things, and so they started having Wednesday evening Bible studies. And this was a polarizing development. People were either for it or against it. There weren't much neutral grounds. But a majority of the Amish didn't see the need for it. They felt it was an attempt to get the young people away from the Amish church, the way things had been done. This caused enough of a concern that the Amish actually, after a few years, started their own school. And it's hard for us in today's culture to look back and understand the culture back then, but it was different. I mentioned something at home about I would enjoy becoming a teacher and maybe continue my high school. Mom and Dad were just really, really upset. They asked, what do you think the people would say if you would do something like that, you know? So I just gave it up. Ironically, 10 years later, the board chairman drove in to our driveway and asked if I'd consider teaching school next year. And so I'll say this, I believe firmly that if you have a dream that you're convinced the Lord is putting in your heart and the doors are all closed, just give it up. Because if it's for you, the Lord will bring it back. And I think that's what happened here. Plainview has had its ups and downs, and here's a chart showing the attendance. Actually, it started off with 67 students. And of course, the following year, the third classroom was added, and people were waiting to get in until that was finished. So the second year it went up to over 100 from 67, and it peaked at 1950 with over 125 students. And then there were some troubles and dissatisfaction. The Amish started their own school. Actually, they had two schools at one time. And in 1960, the enrollment was actually about 62. It's about half of what it was in 1950. But then things started going better, and by the time I started teaching, it was up to about close to 90. So that gives a little picture of some of the ups and downs that happened during this 20-year period, the first 20 years of Plainview School. Looking back at the beginning of Plainview School, it's really hard for us in today's climate to understand the sacrifice it took to get started. There's no question at all in my mind that times are easier now than they were back there by far. I cannot overemphasize the sacrifice that was made by these early pioneers of Christian education at Plainview.
The vision of the 1940s for Christian education has been handed down to our generation, and my goal is to keep the vision alive for future generations. Thanks to Jonas J. Gingrich and others who made great sacrifices for the sake of the children of this community. And I'm looking forward to send our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and however long time stands, I'd like to see that vision carried on to future generations.
Today, 75 years later, The spirit of growth, of learning, of community is still alive and well.
My number one goal as a teacher is to influence my kids towards Christ and to encourage them to be learners and lovers and spreaders of the truth.
The most important lesson that Plainview taught me was not to whine about stuff that has to get done. Like if I got an assignment that's real long or tedious, it has to get done, so there's no point in complaining about it.
A lesson that I've learned in Plainview is that trivial things like getting good grades or like something that seems very serious at the moment actually isn't necessarily a big thing later on in life.
Most important lesson I learned is how to read. The most important thing I've learned at Plainview is being kind to other people.
My number one goal as a teacher is to help my students learn how to think for themselves and develop a biblical worldview.
My favorite thing about going to school is recess and just like playing and like hanging out with my friends. Recess. Learning cursive. Doing spelling.
Being able to hang out with friends and learning about interesting school subjects.
The curtain shot all the way down Jolly's neck and fell, plopped into the net that Bramwell held out for him.
My main goal as a teacher is to teach the kids how to learn. I want them to learn how to harness their creativity and strengths and boundless energy and use them as tools to learn about the world that God has created for them.
The most important lesson Plainview has taught me is that effort matters more than grades do.
My favorite thing about Plainview is that it teaches a good work ethic. It holds you accountable to get your stuff done by when they say, and I think that's very important for adulting and stuff like that.
The most important lesson Plainview taught me is to be kind to each other.
The most important thing I've learned here is the golden rule when we played dodgeball and scatterball.
I like that our school teaches us education through a Christian perspective.
This poem says what my vision and my goal is for my students. I want to teach my students how to live this life on earth, to face its struggles and its strifes, and to improve their worth. Not just the lesson in a book or how the rivers flow, but how to choose the proper path wherever they may go, to understand eternal truth and know the right from wrong, and gather all the beauty of a flower and a song. For if I help the world to grow in wisdom and in grace, then I shall feel like I have won and I have filled my place. And so I ask your guidance, Lord, that I may do my part for character and confidence and happiness of heart.
This place has stood the test of time for 75 years because the people, the generations, have made it strong. Those who have paved the way have given us a sure foundation to build on, to continue the legacy of Plainview. It is up to us to ensure that legacy continues for generation upon generation, build in a future for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to benefit from.